Welcome back to another episode of the Breakthrough Lab podcast. Today, this episode is inspired by two things. Number one, the fact that this is our 22nd episode. And number two, a little bit of Alex Hormozy, who is a very famous coachy type of guy.
Very successful role model that we both have, who is he a billionaire yet?
I don't know. I don't really care.
Overnight?
Yeah, overnight. No, he's been in the game for a long time. Either way, he had a post on Threads in the last several weeks or something like that. Maybe it was months. Okay, I sent it to Michelle because I thought, hey, this is relevant to our interests. It was basically communicating that in order to be in the top 1% of podcasters, you have to have published 21 episodes at least, because there's like millions, billions of something like that of podcasts out there. And of them all, 90% of them don't ever make it past episode 1, and 99% of them don't make it past the episode 21, or I think episode 20. Once they hit episode 21, then they're in the top 1%. Not in terms of stats like viewership or anything like that, but just in terms of your commitment to your pursuit, how much effort you've put in, how far you've come, how much progress you've made. And so that being the case, I remember I sent this to Michelle months ago and said, hey, we're going to be this. We're going to be in the top 1%. And here we are. We just had our 21st episode published and we are celebrating.
And in honor of that, we decided we would make this entire episode about celebration and why it's so important.
Yeah, and celebration is something that a lot of people struggle with, myself included. I know that for many of you out there, even though you have experienced success in your career, in your relationship, in your life, in your health, you might not be proud of the accomplishments you've made. You might even be, once you hit a certain target, you might just shift the goalposts even further. So I got that target, but what I'm really going for is the next thing. And you miss the opportunity to celebrate yourself and reward yourself for the good work that you've done. And as a result, a lot of people find that they can't even, they sort of lose track of how far they've come. They lose their feeling of their deserve it factor, their feeling of worth for the success they've had, for the progress they've made.
Yeah, and this can lead to an imbalance where you feel like you are all work and no play. And finding balance isn't, our favorite term. It's more finding harmony, because it's not always going to be balanced. Sometimes you will be spending more time in, one area of life than another, depending on the season. But finding a harmony. And I recall also there was a season of life where I was pushing myself so hard that my husband, I can't remember if we were married yet. But he looked at me one day and he's like, you literally just reached X goal and you've already moved on to the next thing. Like, when are you going to just pause and be happy for what you have? And I was like, whoa, like, absolutely. First of all, didn't notice it, didn't realize that he noticed it because I wasn't even aware. And I remember thinking, well, I'm just so motivated. I'm just so motivated to get to where I want to go. And I'm so excited and lit about having reached this that I want to keep going. And at the same time, it's like in that 1 second that he gave me pause, I was able to reflect and think, man, like, is this what I seem like to others? That I'm just not happy and I can't be satisfied? Because I think he even used words, somewhat like that, like, oh, when are you going to be satisfied? And I was like, oh, and that's one perspective to look at it. And, I made a decision. I was like, you know what? Maybe he's right. Maybe I do need to pause I don't celebrate these things. I don't celebrate the achievements, the milestones, the progress, the small wins along the way.
Yeah. And my guess is that if you are listening to this episode right now and you're relating to this, you probably want to feel worthy of your success. You probably want to feel like your success and progress matter, to feel valuable. You probably want to get that recognition, whether that's from yourself or from others. You probably want to have that balance. Yeah, to have fun and have balance and harmony in your life. You probably want to be celebrating yourself, but you're not. So our goal for you for this episode is for you to have a better understanding and awareness of how important it is to celebrate yourself and to celebrate others. And not just that, but to actually feel like you want to and to dedicate time to it, to be intentional about it.
And to ultimately be able to slow down to speed up. We've all probably heard this at one point or another. You got to walk before you run. Well, sometimes just like me, you need a pause. You need to take a moment to celebrate. And we're going to talk about the benefits behind that, not just for yourself, but for others. So what happens when you don't celebrate yourself? We've talked about this already a little bit, but one of the biggest things that happens is that you can end up burning out. And this is one of the reasons that my husband paused me and said, "Hey, stop, slow down. I know you're excited, Anne. Can you just take a minute here?" Because, sometimes when we're high achievers, we are so excited that we find it difficult to take a minute to just slow down. And that can lead to burnout. It could also lead you to lose your direction because, again, you are going so fast. You're going 1,000,000 miles per hour that you're not taking the time to reflect on all of the wins that you're having. Because the thing is that when you reflect on your wins, you also have to recognize them. You have to learn to recognize what's working and what's not, what behaviors are working, what got me the outcomes I wanted. And then you're able to celebrate them. And if you're not taking the time to do that sort of reflection, then you could absolutely just be doing things that aren't working without even realizing because you're going so fast. And, one of the other, even more, I would say one of the deeper things that comes about when you don't celebrate yourself or you don't take time for celebration in general, because it's not always just about you, but, but also others in your environment, is that you start to unconsciously train your unconscious mind to have a lack of self-love or self-worth. It's almost like you start to program this rhythm of your life where you just have to be go, 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 go. And it may even lead you to working harder than you need to, right? Like a lot of us want things to be efficient and easy and gentle. And, yes, we know we have to put energy into things, but how great would it be if things were easier? And again, slowing down, celebrating, it does give us that time and that space. And it builds this habit. It builds these patterns in our mind that our unconscious mind learns to recognize, that we are able to start seeing more evidence of our progress. Because again, if you're not stopping to celebrate, then you're not you're not training yourself to look for evidence of that progress. And what can happen here is that it doesn't just apply to you. I was actually in a program, a group coaching program, and my coach mentor was incredible. She was just absolutely phenomenal. And one of the things that I complimented her on was how amazing her feedback was. I told her, I have literally never heard someone who gives as good feedback as you do. The way that she would do it, she'd do it in the feedback sandwich style, starting with the positive, then with the constructive stretch goals, if you will, and then ending on a positive note. But it was like she didn't have to search for the positive. She just had so many things to say. And what that does when you give somebody feedback that way, you also help to reinforce what they're doing right, which is a great thing to have so that they don't stop doing it, because sometimes we stop doing the things that we don't get recognition or feedback on. And her response to me was like, I thank you for that. I appreciate that, because I had to work on that a lot. I was so self-critical of myself that I had a really hard time finding positive things to say for feedback for others. And that just blew my awareness wide open, because I was like, whoa, if I want to get better at giving feedback, I actually have to be able to do this for myself. And so that's why this episode, we're talking not just about how do you celebrate yourself, how do you celebrate others? Because it is absolutely linked together, because it's the same skill that you're doing. Your unconscious mind doesn't care if you're doing it for you or for someone else. It's the same type of habit.
I'm doing a lot of listening to this episode because this episode is very much something that I need to hear more of. in particular because I struggle a lot with not celebrating others per se, although I do have a tendency to hold others to high standards because I hold myself to very high standards, but just with allowing myself to celebrate myself in general. I tend to downplay my own accomplishments and focus on what I could have done but didn't, or how far I could have come but didn't get there. How much further along I should be on towards my big grand goal, or my picture of what my life is supposed to look like, or whatever. And so for me, and I recognize this, I have to be more intentional in general about celebrating my wins, whether they are big or small. Because if I don't, then it really tends to bring me into a place of burnout and low grade depression. Mm-hmm. And even knowing that, I still struggle. Like I still have the tendency to be like, okay, yeah, so I just hit this X income per month milestone. Meh, goalpost shift.
Well, it's very much related. And I, thank you for being so honest here, because you aren't the only one. There are so many people who are high achievers. I mean, I talked about my very own experiences. Yeah. And the thing is that even after you do the work and you feel like you deserve it and on all of these things, it is a habit that you need to build, because if you haven't been doing it, you need to set aside time to really build this up. That's why the fourth requisite for change is focusing on what you want, right? Mm-hmm. So like that's an example of focusing on what you want instead of thinking of the coulda, shoulda, woulda's, celebrating the progress you've made, not the perfection you imagine. Celebrating the progress you've made, not the perfection that you imagine. Focus on what you want. It's kind of like doing gratitude in real life, right? You're saying, oh, thank goodness that I did this and accomplished this. I want more of this. Let me take a moment to make a big deal out of this thing that I want more of. And the more you do that, it's just like doing reps on a workout machine. And let's just be very clear. Again, there are many people who are on the path, who are on the journey of personal growth and development, who are leaders, who are parents, who feel like they have to keep going. In some cases, for people, you would be surprised how many people have these very deep underlying beliefs, programming, that they believe that the only way to change is to be really hard on themselves, or even sometimes to even hate themselves, to beat themselves up so much that they can force a change. We talk a lot about change on the Breakthrough Lab podcast, and the way to do it is at the unconscious level. And you can force yourself, you can willpower yourself into doing something, changing something for a while. And if the programming is deep enough, if it is just that ingrained and you don't do, the work, sometimes you hear that change is like layers. You have like an onion, there's layer after layer. If you're not doing it in a way that will allow you to actually get to the root of something, then they just find that they just go back to their old ways. And sometimes even worse than before, because now you feel that much more down on yourself that you screwed up again, that you missed the mark again, that nothing has changed. You start to lose integrity with yourself. And then when you do that, you start to become out of alignment with your unconscious mind as well. Because remember, we have our conscious mind, we have our unconscious mind, and then we have our higher conscious mind. And it's like that inner critic. The more you hear that inner critic, the more you've got this war going on inside yourself. And you probably know what I'm talking about. I think most of us have had that internal struggle where there's an angel on one shoulder and then the devil on the other side. And one is telling you you're doing great, and the other one's just like, you suck.
Every time I hear that, I always think of Emperor's New Groove, by the way. Crunk.
Yeah.
Or Kronk.
Yeah. And so for a lot of people, it can take some time, having this trial and error to realize that, hey, this isn't going to work. Motivating myself by beating myself up, by being the inner critic, by hating myself. Like, this is not actually the way, because again, you're focusing on what you don't want. You're saying, oh, I didn't hit this target. I'm going to spend all my time dwelling on it and thinking about it and not thinking about what can I do instead?
Yeah.
How does it get any better than this?
It might sound cliche, but love is the answer to so much in life. Healing and resolution, and even in this case, getting what you want. Real change and progress towards your goals is going to be fueled by love and feeling like you deserve your success.
Absolutely.
To get those goals.
Yeah.
And the way you practice that is through celebration, self-celebration.
Yeah. And when you learn to celebrate, if you do it genuinely, you can get yourself to feel those happy feelings, those higher positive vibration feelings akin to love, and you're showing yourself self-care, self-love. That's when you can start to really encourage yourself and ingrain those newer habits. So you can celebrate all of the big things, but also the little things. Celebrate waking up when you wanted to. Celebrate brushing your teeth. Celebrate yourself out loud to people like we did at the beginning of this episode. And also celebrate yourself quietly when nobody else is around. Not because you need the attention, but because you're just like, yeah, I'm awesome. High five to me.
You could do that in a journal. You could do that through an action.
And this is a great time to say too that, hey, sometimes it can seem a little difficult to start celebrating ourselves out of the blue. And okay, if that feels true for you right now, then a way that you can improve that is by celebrating those around you. Triple the amount of celebration and praise and recognition that you give to those around you. Again, what are you doing? You're starting to train your unconscious mind to start noticing all of the little milestones and progress and behaviors. And when you can see something outside of yourself, you absolutely can see them within yourself, because you can't see anything outside of you that is already also something that you currently possess.
Yeah. You have a 4-year-old son now?
Yeah.
You probably praise him and celebrate him for the tiniest of things. Good job, buddy.
Yes.
You brushed your teeth.
Everything.
And so I'm curious, has that made it easier for you to, in recognizing and looking for those small things to celebrate, to recognize things that you can celebrate for yourself too?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent observation. And absolutely, especially because when I praise him, I'm not going to say 100% of the time, because as anyone who's a parent knows, sometimes you're clapping for things that you're just like, okay, whatever. And many of the times, though, I'm very heartfelt and feeling that gratitude and the sense of wonderment, because as a parent, that's been one of the coolest things. And I think even as a leader, like when you train someone, when you're helping somebody develop and you're seeing them succeed, you do feel these feelings of happiness in praising and encouraging them on their journey. It can be very easy. And the more you do that, I think it does become easier to celebrate yourself, because Joshua was asking me, well, do you have an easy time celebrating yourself? And I was like, yeah, I totally do. I absolutely do. It wasn't always that way, though. Mm-hmm. He asked me, when did that change? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that had something to do with it.
Maybe. I didn't even think to ask that earlier.
See, the thing is that as adults, we set our sights on a goal and we bring about all of the actions and all of the energy and all the time and all the effort that it takes to manifest that goal. But sometimes when we get there, everything just seems so mundane, right? It doesn't feel like we actually crested a Mount Everest, even though it felt like that when we were on the journey. And so what happens is that you sometimes do, like what Joshua shared earlier. It feels like it's not impossible or out of reach anymore. It's so mundane. Now it's easy. Now I don't feel like celebrating because it's not hard.
I think part of the problem with that too is that the closer you get to that goalpost, the less of a big deal that goalpost is going to seem. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's important to celebrate even before, like just before you get to that goalpost, not actually when you have reached it, but like 90% of the way.
and along the way, like every single
Oh yeah.
chance that you have on the way, right?
Yeah. Because when you get that close to it, it seems so much less of a challenge. It's like if you are weightlifting and you are starting out benching like 115 or something, and your goal is 205, and you are at 195 at this, like you started at 115, now you're at 195 and your goal is 205. You've already come such a long way, and you're still not at that goal. And now the gap between where you are and the goal is so small, the goal seems so much less compelling at that point.
I know what you're talking about because I have a tonal I exercise on. And for some time I was working out on, I was like, this is too easy. Is this actually, am I actually working out? Am I actually, like, it didn't feel hard enough. And so then I stopped exercising for like, I don't know, 2-3 weeks, went back into it, and it was hard. I was like, oh my God, okay. I'm not going to downplay it anymore because, again, when we're putting in the work, when we're putting in the energy, when we're putting in the commitment, time, the effort, it doesn't feel hard anymore after a certain point. But then that doesn't mean that you haven't made progress.
Yeah. So don't wait to celebrate.
Mm-hmm. This is super important if you're in a leadership role as well, whether you're a boss, a parent, team lead. And for all of you savvy leaders out there, you've probably already heard this. So here's a reminder. However much you're celebrating or recognizing your employees or team members, it's not enough. And I've already mentioned this, but like triple it. Like you may think it's enough, and people actually work harder for praise than raises, for recognition, for feeling validation. 6 out of 10 employees are motivated more by recognition than they are by money. And I know that was 100%. That's always been true for me. I'm one of those 6 out of 10 who would say, I would rather you appreciate. I'm more likely to stay if you appreciate me. And I know that I'm appreciated, even if you can't pay me whatever. Maybe I know I could go somewhere else, but if I feel like I belong, like I matter here, it's a super important part about any sort of leadership to help your employees feel like that. Because the number one needs that we have as humans is to feel seen, feel heard, and feel like we matter. It's also the number one reason why companies lose top talent, is because if the talent doesn't feel appreciated, then money starts to talk real loud. So I was with a mentor of mine, and he was explaining how there was a poll that showed that 9 out of 10 employees felt unrecognized by their supervisor. And then of those same supervisors, same company here, same organization, or same, people who were being polled, 80% of those same supervisors thought that they were doing enough to recognize employees. So think about that disparity. 90% of all the employees don't feel like they're seen, heard, or like they matter, like they're not being celebrated, they're not being appreciated. Yet 80% of all of the leadership thinks they're doing a good job. There may be a problem here. There may be a problem here. But this happens. This happens because we don't know how to celebrate ourselves. We lose sight of celebrating others. We start to think, well, this is expected, and here's where the bar is. And at the end of the day, you wouldn't want your team members or your family members or the people you care about to feel that way, would you? And if you don't want them to feel that way, you also shouldn't want that for yourself.
Snaps, because it's a two-way street.
It is.
You have to develop a skill for celebrating yourself if you want to get better at celebrating others.
Or vice versa.
Or vice versa. Indeed, two-way street.
So what happens if you do? So whether you're listening to this from the perspective as a leader, as a team member, it's apparent that we're not always doing as much as we can, right? That's why we say triple it. However much you think you're doing for yourself or for others, just do more of it. Make it a habit. Make it so unconscious that everything can become happy and a celebration. You can be grateful about it. My question for you now, Joshua, is what do we do if you do have a really easy time recognizing it others, and not in yourself. Because you mentioned that this was sometimes true for you. And so just wondering how would one navigate that?
Well, I also said there was an episode where I was going to be doing more of the listening, the advice giving for that reason. However, I do know one thing, which is to celebrate at 90% before 90% of your goal. So if you have an income goal of $10,000 a month, celebrate when you hit 9K.
So do you feel as though by applying the principle of, tripling the amount of celebration you do for others, ingraining it as a habit, can help you to start feeling that way more about yourself?
Yeah. And I mean, that's why I also asked you about your son, because I saw that as a potential avenue for that kind of thing. And I do, when I do try and be more intentional about self-celebration, I do things like treating myself to a nice dinner out, or less from the place of my higher self. I guess none of this is, maybe it's not useful in this case to think of higher self and lower self, but I definitely am very into fragrances. And if I hit a new milestone in income for a month, I will tend to be like, oh, what's a fragrance that I've wanted to have for a while and never had? And so I'll just go buy it. Or, something with the income, something where I'm like, yes, I can celebrate that I have the income by doing this thing and putting it to use. I wouldn't do the same thing if I hit a new goal in my fitness. I wouldn't go and treat myself to a nice dinner or buy a new perfume or anything like that, because it's not really the product of fitness.
Yes, if you have a goal to lose weight, it is not advisable for the celebration to be something with food.
Time to binge eat. Yeah.
When you're thinking about celebrations, then keep in mind that whatever you're doing to celebrate should not leave you back at square one.
Yeah. But in that case, you can throw yourself a little party or something.
Absolutely.
Or you can buy that new swimsuit or whatever.
Exactly.
To show off that bod. So that's my sort of treat yourself kind of thing. I know some people like to do things like buy themselves flowers and whatnot, or a nice card, or a spa day. These are kind of like self-care things, but they can be ways to celebrate yourself too.
The main thing here is set aside some time to reflect on what your wins are, so that you know what to celebrate. And your wins don't always necessarily have to be just the outcome. They can be the behavior. In fact, if you celebrate the behavior, you are more likely to encourage that behavior. And this not just goes for yourself, but in others. You're working with others. Instead of celebrating the outcome, then you celebrate the behavior.
Yeah, and it's important to celebrate, in this case, when you're making progress towards a goal. It's important for your mental well-being that you focus on the lead measures rather than the lag measures. So if you're trying to, for example, grow your social media account, it's dependent on two things. It's dependent on the lead efforts, which are commenting on posts or publishing things yourself or following people, or however you might want to try and do that. And then there's lag measures, which might be followers gained, replies gained, stuff like that, views on your videos or whatever. And so if you want to not lose your mind and have a little mental breakdown, you need to be focusing on what you're doing versus what's happening, what you can control, the lead measures, the actions you're able to take, your behaviors. And that's true for anything, not just social media, for the income target you're trying to hit, for the body goal that you have for yourself, the relationship goal. And another thing that she said that I want to talk about is, it's important to celebrate your wins regularly. We have a practice of doing this on a weekly basis every Sunday. And that's a part of our group coaching program. And part of the program that we take clients on when we coach them one-on-one is a regular practice of self-celebration and guidelines on how to do it, and little prompts that you can follow.
To encourage the self-reflection so you can keep track of these things.
Yes. And it's not just about celebration and patting yourself on the back. It's about tracking yourself too. Because as we said earlier, when you're not noticing your wins, you're not noticing what's working. And if you're not noticing what's working, how are you going to distinguish and do anything differently from the times where it's not working? That's why it's a very important part of our coaching program.
Yeah, it all ties back together.
Yeah.
If you want to achieve massive progress, celebration is a huge part of that, just like recovery is such a huge part of a successful workout regimen so that you don't move backwards. And so just to really recap, the steps to really be able to implement this into your life is to reflect, to track your wins, have some sort of system process to see your progress so that you know what the wins are, so you know what to celebrate, celebrating the behaviors, not just the outcomes. Not to say that you can't celebrate both, just don't limit yourself to the bigger wins, celebrate the smaller ones as well.
Yeah. At least don't stake your entire happiness on the outcomes,
Exactly.
on the lag measures.
And then absolutely celebrating at 90%. When you've reached 90% of your goal, Joshua gave the example earlier of, once you get to 195 from 115 bench press and your target is 205, celebrate at that 195 mark. Then you can reset your goal so that becomes the, getting to 205 now becomes the first 10% of the next goal that you're going to. And lastly, if it's easier for you to start with others, then start with others. And if you are in a leadership position, watch the magic as you help others be lifted up and transformed, because now you're helping them feel like they are seen, like they're heard, like they matter, they belong, they have validation, they're safe, they're protected. And what more powerful thing can we provide for somebody else or for each other than those sorts of feelings of acceptance?
Indeed. And so we invite you, as your first step in practicing celebrating not just yourself, but also others. We invite you to congratulate us on our 21st episode of the Breakthrough Lab podcast, this being, of course, the 22nd. And if you haven't done so, leave us a 5-star review. The thing that you always hear at the end of the podcasts. Have you done it? Because that would be a wonderful way to celebrate us so that we can continue to celebrate you. Or if you've already left a 5-star review, you could also share this episode on your Instagram story or send a text to somebody that links to this episode if you think that it's something that they could hear, or something, a different episode if you thought that might be helpful for them. Either way, just help get the word out. Because the more people who hear our message, the more people we can impact, which means the more people we can help break through. And so with that, we'll see you next time on the Breakthrough Lab podcast.